Part 1. The biting winds of the northern border truly felt like blades, scraping against Xiao Jing's perennially pale face, which looked as if he had lost blood for years. Yet, no matter how fierce they were, they couldn't blow away the deep-seated 8-year-old blood feud in his eyes. That hatred was so thick it couldn't be dissolved, only growing more potent with each passing year. He lived in the enemy capital of Pingyang, outwardly called a hostage prince, but in his bones he was merely a prisoner in a golden cage, ignored and forgotten. Ever since the Great Yin dynasty collapsed in a fiery storm, he was the last drop of blood from that shattered empire, a symbol that could be erased at any moment. When he was 7, that great fire and the thunderous roar of horse hooves tore his world to shreds. He watched as the palace walls crumbled in the flames, and his father's head was mounted high on the city gate. His mother, in her last moments, clutched his cold little hand in a pool of blood, the final warmth from her fingertips searing him with pain. Her dying words, each one a tear of blood, were carved deep into his bones. "Jingo, my child, live on, for the great Yin for us get revenge." From that day on, 10 years passed in the blink of an eye. He became a venomous snake lurking in the shadows, biding his time in the most unassuming corners of Pingyang. For 10 years, he meticulously studied the art of forbearance, suppressing all his resentment and indignation deep within his heart, making it harder than the city wall's foundations and colder than black iron. He also mastered the high art of disguise, painting himself as a complete wastrel, indifferent to the world, a living corpse. No one who looked at him saw any threat. The courtyard where he lived was so remote it was maddening, with walls so rotted that the mottled adobe was exposed. His daily life was as predictable as an old clock. He studied ancient texts by the dim light of an oil lamp, practiced calligraphy, or simply stared at the few lonely plum trees in his yard. In the dead of winter, those trees stood proudly, their unyielding spirit a perfect mirror of his own frozen heart. His temperament was sullen, his brows always furrowed with an unmelting frost, and a smile never touched his face. He avoided the banquets and feasts in the palace and court whenever possible. If he couldn't, he would find the most inconspicuous corner, sit silently, and coldly observe the fawning faces of the enemy officials. The emperor of the new dynasty was content to leave him be, not seeing this relic of the old dynasty as a threat. This was exactly what Xiao Jing wanted. He knew that the path to revenge was bloody, and every step had to be taken with caution, waiting for the moment when thunder would strike and blood would paint the sky. Every spring, Pingyang held a grand military parade. It was not only a show of the new dynasty's might but also a silent political demonstration. Xiao Jing was, of course, forced to attend, placed in the most obscure corner of the viewing stand. He sat on the cold stone bench watching the dusty parade ground. The clash of weapons, the flapping of banners, the roars of the soldiers, all of it was just annoying background noise to him, a prelude to revenge. It was then that his eyes were drawn to a figure on horseback in the center of the field. "Oh, look, isn't that the newly appointed General Mu Rongzi? He's barely 20, and he's already won so many glorious battles. The emperor thinks highly of him, says he's the next great general with a promising future." A eunuch's shrill voice chattered beside him. Mu Rongzi rode forward, his shimmering silver armor so bright in the midday sun that it made it hard to open one's eyes. He looked like a god of war descended from the heavens, radiating an inviolable aura. His posture was ramrod straight, carrying an imposing dignity. He was handsome, almost excessively so, but his breathtaking sharpness was not lessened in the slightest. Instead, it made him even more intimidating. His eyes burned with a fire, the sincere devotion to his country, a passionate pursuit of victory, and an extreme obsession with his martial arts. His cavalry unit moved in perfect unison, charging forward like a flood of beasts, with an air of invincibility. He was loyal and patriotic, the sharpest sword of the new dynasty, and the biggest stumbling block on Xiao Jing's path to revenge. One he least wanted to confront, but also one he couldn't avoid. After the parade, the emperor held a great banquet in the Golden Hall. Xiao Jing, as usual, hid in a corner, coldly observing the sycophantic officials. He was thoroughly annoyed and was about to find an excuse to slip away when a clear, somewhat unrestrained laugh reached his ears. Mu Rongzi was walking over, surrounded by several burly generals, their laughter particularly jarring in the noisy hall. Mu Rongzi's eyes inadvertently swept over Xiao Jing. Unlike the other officials, he didn't quickly look away. Instead, he stopped, his gaze lingering on Xiao Jing for a moment. There was no usual disdain or scorn in his eyes, but a hint of barely perceptible curiosity and scrutiny, even a touch of thoughtful analysis. "Is this the fourth prince the emperor found again? I've heard much about you, a name that echoes like thunder." Mu Rongzi's voice was loud and sincere, with the frankness of a general. He took a few steps forward and gave Xiao Jing a slight nod. There was no arrogance in the gesture, but a certain sense of seeking advice. Xiao Jing looked up, and his cold gaze met Mu Rongzi's fiery one for the first time. The glance was like melting snow or a raging prairie fire. An invisible electric current shot between them, silent yet thrilling. Xiao Jing had never been looked at so directly. In those eyes, there was no pity, no mockery, just a deep assessment, like a hunter sizing up his prey, and even a hint of appreciation, as if he had discovered something interesting. Not to mention, the person staring at him was the enemy's brave general, the young war god who had just shown an unrivaled edge on the parade ground, the future pillar of an empire. "General Mu Rong flatters me. I am but a useless man. My name is nothing to speak of." Xiao Jing's voice was low and hoarse, with the awkwardness of someone who hadn't spoken in a long time. Mu Rongzi's lips curled into a slight smile, open and confident, with no trace of gloom. "I hear the prince is fond of plum blossoms, and your plum grove is unparalleled in Pingyang. If there's an opportunity, I would like to visit, to seek your guidance and enjoy the view." There was no feigned courtesy in his words. Xiao Jing was slightly taken aback. The frost between his brows seemed to loosen for a moment but quickly solidified again. A tiny, imperceptible flicker of a strange feeling emerged in his heart. Then he nodded. "If the general does not mind, I welcome you at any time." After that, Mu Rongzi did visit several times. But he came not to spy or to show off, but to genuinely seek advice with the straightforwardness of a warrior. He would bring precious ancient books, play chess with Xiao Jing, discuss military strategies, and even talk about the art of governance. Each of their conversations was like a silent chess match. On the board, Mu Rongzi's style was sharp, his attacks like a tidal wave, grand and expansive. But no matter how hard he pressed, his moves would always be defused at a critical moment by one of Xiao Jing's seemingly careless but incredibly subtle plays, like a punch landing on cotton, soft and powerless. Brother Zhao's chess looks ordinary on the surface, but it hides a deadly intent. Your moves are deep and flawless. I am truly enlightened and admire you greatly. Mu Rongzi would praise him sincerely, his eyes filled with a mix of scrutiny and admiration. When they discussed military strategy, Mu Rongzi advocated for direct, head-on confrontation, which was the instinct and honor of a warrior. Xiao Jing, however, preferred clever schemes and deception. Their ideas were completely different, one a tiger, the other a venomous snake. Yet, in their heated arguments, they found themselves admiring each other's strategies and bearing, and even found inspiration in each other's thinking. General Mu Rong's chess has the bravery of a great warrior, magnificent and awe-inspiring, Xiao Jing would return the compliment, a very slight curve appearing at the corner of his lips. It was the only smile Mu Rongzi ever saw on his icy face. Each time he saw that smile, Mu Rongzi felt something stir in his heart, like a stream quietly melting beneath the ice and snow, silent yet unstoppable. Over time, Mu Rongzi felt that beneath Xiao Jing's cold facade lay a profound wisdom and an indefinable melancholy, a mist that he always wanted to part. And Xiao Jing, in turn, was gradually captivated by Mu Rongzi's upright and fiery vitality, which was like a beacon of sunlight, warming his long-frozen heart. They were enemies, yet they were evenly matched confidants. Their souls collided and merged in a silent contest. This mutual admiration became much more complicated in the court. Whenever someone inadvertently mentioned Xiao Jing's identity as a former prince, Mu Rongzi would subtly deflect the conversation, skillfully change the topic, or use his glorious military achievements to quash the gossip. The whispers would recede like a tide. Xiao Jing saw this and felt a slight ripple in his heart, but he dared not dwell on it. He knew this mutual admiration was a luxury, potentially a fatal one. He was afraid he would get lost in this momentary warmth and forget the blood feud he carried on his shoulders. It was around this time that a strategist named Lin Mo rose rapidly in the court, thanks to his extraordinary intellect and unfathomable cunning. He was as elegant as bamboo, but his eyes were as sharp as an eagle's. Always dressed in a long black robe, he had a cool and distant air. He was a new favorite of the emperor, known as the ghostly genius, and his strategies were often able to see through people's hearts and manipulate the bigger picture. However, Lin Mo and Xiao Jing were not strangers. They had been childhood friends, growing up together in the Great Yin Imperial Palace. Lin Mo's father was the Grand Tutor of the Great Yin and a close friend of Xiao Jing's father. After the fall of the Great Yin, Lin Mo had wandered before finally joining the new dynasty. But he had always secretly watched over Xiao Jing, burying his emotions deep down, turning them into a kind of near-obsessive protection. The first time Lin Mo saw Mu Rongzi in court was during a routine meeting. Mu Rongzi's brilliance and glorious military achievements had made him the center of attention. Lin Mo sat below the emperor, seemingly unmoved, but when he saw Mu Rongzi's eyes fall on Xiao Jing, his heart sank. A powerful jealousy coiled around his heart like a venomous snake. The Jinger, who had once belonged only to him, was now being scrutinized and even admired by an outsider. From that moment on, Lin Mo began to coincidentally run into Xiao Jing. He would find ways to be near Xiao Jing's courtyard or visit on the pretext of discussing ancient texts. He wasn't as straightforward and open as Mu Rongzi. His approach was more subtle, more aggressive. He would send rare, solitary copies of ancient books, just to watch Xiao Jing's focused expression as he read. He would quietly help Xiao Jing solve problems, forcing Xiao Jing to accept his seemingly selfless kindness. Mu Rongzi noticed Lin Mo's presence and sensed his unusual interest in Xiao Jing. The general's intuition told him that this frail-looking strategist was not a good person and was in fact his biggest rival in love. Between him and Lin Mo, a silent contest began in the court and beside Xiao Jing, an open struggle and a hidden undercurrent. Xiao Jing's revenge plan, a chess game 10 years in the making, finally reached its most critical moment. He had secretly contacted former officials of the old dynasty, infiltrated the enemy's military and political strongholds, and quietly woven a massive web. In the dead of night, he would don black stealth clothes, weave through the dark alleys of Pingyang, and secretly meet with the old dynasty's leader, Zhao Yi, to carefully orchestrate the downfall of the empire. However, he knew in his heart that to completely topple this massive empire, he needed Mu Rongzi to work for him, to become the most critical and sharpest piece in his revenge game. a piece that was destined to be sacrificed. Lin Mo, on the other hand, was another trump card he would use to restrain and deceive the new emperor. On a stormy night, with lightning tearing through the sky and rain pouring down, Xiao Jing was in the secret chamber of his courtyard. 2 candles cast their light on his face, which was resolute and cold. He took a deep breath, calming the violent trembling in his heart, and then, facing Mu Rongzi who sat opposite him, he confessed his identity word by word. Mu Rongzi, his voice was low with a suppressed hoarseness, I am not a lost prince nor an idle lord. I am the sole bloodline of the great Yin dynasty, the last hope of the Shao clan. My father, mother, brothers, sisters, my entire family, all died under the hooves of your new dynasty. They died with their eyes wide open. I am here to seek justice for them. You've been using me all this time? A complete and utter deception. Mu Rongzi's voice trembled with a great pain. His eyes were filled with disbelief and the fury of betrayal. Xiao Jing didn't deny it. He just looked at Mu Rongzi quietly. A flicker of unnoticeable pain and struggle flashed in his eyes but was quickly covered by the coldness of his hatred. Yes. You need to be loyal to your dynasty. I need to avenge my family. This is our fate and our unchangeable positions. We were a chess game all along. I just made the first move. Mu Rongzi felt a bone-chilling coldness shoot from his feet to the top of his head. He abruptly drew his sword from his waist, the blade ringing in the chamber, and pointed it directly at Xiao Jing's throat. The tip of the sword was only a hair's breadth from Xiao Jing's skin. Xiao Jing didn't move, staring straight at the blade, not a single ripple in his eyes. I have no choice, his voice was frighteningly calm. In the end, Mu Rongzi couldn't bring himself to deliver that fatal blow. He threw the sword weakly to the ground and collapsed, covering his face with his hands in agony. Xiao Jing had successfully used Mu Rongzi's guilt and conflict to make him make mistakes in several crucial military operations, paving the way for his revenge. Each time Mu Rongzi was reprimanded and punished for his mistakes, Xiao Jing would feel a pang of pain deep inside, but he would suppress it. However, a praying mantis stalks a cicada, unaware of the aureole behind it. The cost of revenge was far heavier than he had imagined. Some of Xiao Jing's former officials had already defected to the new dynasty. When he launched his attack on Pingyang from within and without, he fell into a trap, was captured and surrounded by the royal guard. The one who had exposed him was none other than the old dynasty's leader he had trusted most, Zhao Yi. Your Highness, the times have changed. A wise man submits to the times. Zhao Yi stood opposite him, his eyes full of ambition and cunning. Why cling to old dreams? By following the new dynasty, you can live a better life and enjoy wealth and glory. He even identified the other captured former officials one by one in front of Xiao Jing. Xiao Jing was arrested and thrown into a cold prison. Thick iron chains bound his limbs. He endured torment, but the physical pain was nothing compared to the despair and anguish in his heart. Not only had he been betrayed by the person he trusted most, but Mu Rongzi, due to his mistakes, had also caused the new dynasty to suffer heavy losses. Mu Rongzi was dismissed from his post and stripped of all his honors. Xiao Jing knew he had personally pushed the one person he respected, the one person who had touched his heart, the one who had almost killed him with a sword, into a bottomless abyss. This was a torment far worse than death.